Who was Rudolf Mosse? This is a question that does not need to be asked in Berlin. The traces of the German Jewish publisher and philanthropist are still visible in the city today, and you have seen a lot of these traces during the talk of Elisabeth, for example. However, not many people know Rudolf Mosse as a friend to many artists or as an art collector who opened his collection to the public and whose city palais was therefore soon called the Mosseum in art circles. What was his collection's profile, and what does it say about him? What happened to the artworks during the Nazi era? How exactly can their liquidation be clarified? And where are the artworks located today? Since March 2017, the team of the Mosse Art Research Initiative, in short, MARI, at Berlin's Free University addresses these questions. And I'm directing the project as scholarly coordinator, and I'm very pleased to be able to present it briefly today. The project is innovative in many ways. When we started, it represented an unprecedented public-private partnership in provenance research between public institutions in Germany and the descendants of victims of Nazi persecution, which was already mentioned by Sky. Since then, the MARI team has been very successful in both context and provenance research, and further projects have been initiated on the model of MARI, for example, the Max Stern Cooperation Project in Munich last year, and the Gustav von Klemperer project to reconstruct his porcelain collection in Dresden this year. Before I'm going into more detail about the Mosse Art Research Initiative and its research results so far, I would like to introduce to you the knowledge of Rudolf Mosse's art collection before we started our project. In the 1880s, as one of the most influential figures of the Berlin economic elite in Imperial Germany, Rudolf Mosse had a house built in the center of Berlin and started his collection of art, including several thousand works, paintings, sculptures, works on paper, Benin bronzes, East Asian art, handicrafts, and antiquities. After Rudolf Mosse died in 1920 and a few years later was followed by his wife Emilie, their adopted daughter Felicia inherited the entire estate. Shortly after the Nazis seized power, they liquidated the financially struggling business empire and drove the Lachmann-Mosse couple with their 3 children, Rudolf, Hilde, and George, into exile. In exchange for an exit visa to the US, the couple promised to surrender their entire assets to the German Empire. This included 3 country manors, Schloss Schenkendorf near Berlin, other buildings and plots in the city, and also the mansion with the art collection of Rudolf and Emilie Mosse, as well as the mansion of Felicia and Hans Lachmann-Mosse, with all the furnishings and art objects included. The Nazis founded the Rudolf Mosse Treuhandverwaltung GmbH and commissioned the art dealer Karl Haberstock and Hans Karl Krüger, the co-owner of the Berlin auction house Lepke, with the liquidation of the art collection. The auction was held in May 29 to 30, 1934 at Mosse Palais. A week later, auction house Union auctioned off the inventory of the residence on Maßenstraße and Gut Schenkendorf. After the end of the Second World War, Felicia Lachmann-Mosse made claims for her lost assets under the auspices of the West German laws for compensation and restitution. In 1960, she received compensation for a small portion of her former possessions that had been stored with a German moving company, where it were auctioned off by the German government in 1941. The family withdrew their claim to the lost collection, since it was unable to be more precise about the artworks included. claims to the sites and mansions could not be successfully pursued during the 1950s and the 1960s, since the objects were located in the newly established GDR, where the federal laws on restitution and compensation did not apply. It was only in the 1990s, after the reunification of West and East Germany, and on the basis of the new Property Act, that the real estate could be returned to the Mosse family. The art collection was unaffected by this. However, a renewed claim, long after the expired deadlines of the early federal acts in this matter, was prospect of success after the Washington Conference on Holocaust-era assets in 1998 and its set principles to assist in resolving issues relating to Nazi-confiscated art. Since then, individual works from the former Mosse family collection have been found at the initiative of the heirs, and Roger already told about this. Before Mari started, 17 restitutions have taken place from public institutions or public collections in Germany and Switzerland. Nevertheless, most of the art collection remained lost at that time. This is where Mari stepped in. After the initial restitutions, Germany's Kulturstiftung der Länder took up contact with the Mosse heirs. Roger Strauch, who started our panel, declared a basic willingness to cooperate with public institutions in Germany. The project was located at Berlin's Free University, a research institution unaffected by any restitution claims, with proven expertise in provenance research. The other partners include primarily institutions, museums, and archives that already are engaged in research on Rudolf Mosse, that possesses important documents, or have restituted objects to the heirs. Especially the Stiftung Preußischer Kulturbesitz, with its General Director Hermann Patzinger as co-founder of the Mari project. The basic idea behind the Mosse Art Research Initiative is to bundle of all relevant resources in combination with the various expertise of the cooperation partners, as well as to ease communication between the current holders of artworks from the former Mosse collection, public or private, and the heirs and their representatives. In that way, we hope to provide insights into various different approaches and points of view in order to better solve conflicts in a consensual manner in future. It is key here that Mari has no hierarchical structure. The research is not controlled by the interest of one partner, but coordinated in a scholarly manner. All partners are equal in status. The exchange is not unidirectional, and nobody can claim the authority over interpreting the results. To that extent, restitution negotiations are not even explicitly part of the project. Mari is a research initiative, not a restitution initiative. Maintaining Mari's neutrality is a fundamental requirement for the success of the project. For communication and the exchange of information among partners, the Mari team has developed an internet portal for the digital presentation, analysis, and visualization of the complex material, custom-tailored for the purposes of provenance research. Via the portal, the Mari team would like to address the issues of our research area to the very different target groups of provenance research: museums and archives, historical researchers, law firms, and those interested among the general public, in various levels of examination adequate to each group. The first level includes the object data of the respective work, historical and current photos, if any can be established, as well as a general and concise summary of the state of research. The second level contains a chain of provenance and the sources used. And the third level, and in the third level, the metadata is retrieved as well. Unlike other data banks, the MARI portal does not function as a one-dimensional documentation of research results, but as a research instrument itself. All valid statements on the respective objects, their acquisition and lost paths are transcribed from the source and published in the third level of the portal as metadata. Due to this very time-consuming evaluation of the sources, our research results can be questioned critically. They are transparent and sustainable. In addition, we comply with the principles of the semantic web and present research results in a way that fosters new findings. And in this regard, I would like to express my thanks to the heirs for their incredible support. Within the framework of our cooperation contract, they finance the entirety of that IT costs, including both personal and administrative expenses, which makes our project so unique. Thank you very much, Roger. And now I would like to briefly explain how the MARI team is working. Unlike most provenance research projects in public institutions, the artworks are not actually physically available in order to investigate their biographies. The MARI team is thus faced with a complex challenge of first having to find out what works were acquired by Rudolf Mosse and then lost due to Nazi misappropriation. To yet be able to research the extensive collection on all aspects in the narrowly defined time frame of the project, research is being done with the help of many people. Since the winter semester 2016, I offer seminars on the Rudolf Mosse art collection where students are doing systematic basic research on the lost objects. And the MARI team, with only one full-time post and two half-time posts for provenance research, can use this as the starting point for in-depth research. Goal-oriented coordination provides involved researchers with a necessary network of experts, making the art history department at the Free University with its global orientation an ideal base for such a broad research project. And now let's turn to the collection itself. What have we been able to learn about the collection so far? With the following slides, I would like to give you some insight into the current state of our research. Here you can see some works which we have been able to positively identify by means of newly discovered written documents and photos. These works include paintings by Ludwig Knaus, Hans Thoma, Eugen Bracht, Paul Meyerheim, Karl Albrecht, Edmund Harburger, sculptures by David Levy, Walter Schott, Erdmann Enke, watercolors and drawings by Franz von Lehmbach, Josef von Gebhardt, Melchior Lechter, and many others. We were able to find out much more about the works shown here. Paintings by Oskar Begas, Arnold Böcklin, Lovis Corinth, Anselm Feuerbach, Karl Spitzweg, Pierre-Jacques Dirks, and again by Hans Thoma, sculptures by Gustav Klimt or the Belgian artist Jeff Lambou. In these cases, we were able to not only identify the works, but also find out the later owners after the auction in 1934. Some of the research is even more developed, such as paintings whose traces can follow up until the recent years. This is a case for the painting from Julius Ehrentraut, The Smoker, nearly in the middle of the slide. The Smoker, which was offered in 2015 in a Swiss gallery and sold to a private owner. And another example, the portrait Ninetta by Eugen von Blas, painted in 1887, was auctioned at Sotheby's in New York in 2013. Although there are still some gaps in the provenance chain of these works, we have been able to clearly identify and locate the paintings, sculptures, only the paintings, from which I show you some examples at this slide. This means we know when and where Rudolf Mosse acquired them, where they ended up after the auction in 1935, and where they are today. Yes, and where they are today. We have also contacted their current holders. For example, today the painting by Eduard Grützner is part of a private collection in southern Germany, and the marble sculpture by Gustav Eberlein has been in Hannover-Schmünden since it was donated to the City Museum there in 2017. And the latest discovery is the painting at the bottom of my slide, and we think that it is part of the collection of the Deutsche Historisches Museum, but I have to talk to the provenance researcher here. But we are really sure that this is the painting from the Mosse collection. Yes. So the last group shown included works for which we were able to clarify all open questions and complete the research. The effort involved was quite different in each case. For example, a student discovered an image of Gary Melcher's painting Skater by coincidence. The Arkell Museum in Montgomery County, New York, where the painting is located today, posted an image of the painting on their Facebook page to announce the start of the museum's winter break. The research on Blonde Peasant Girl at the Window by Anders Zorn was far more complicated, since Zorn painted a lot of blonde peasant girls. The painting was acquired by Karl Haberstock. You remember he was one of the organizers of the auction. By Karl Haberstock himself, and immediately sold to the auction house Bukowski in Stockholm, that still exists today but never gives out information about previous transactions. Only according to a Swedish newspaper report in 2003, we learned about the whereabouts of the painting. It was then stolen from the current private holder in Sweden, but returned shortly thereafter. In the newspaper report on the theft, a colored photo of the painting was reproduced, which agrees with the black and white photo and the description in the Lepke catalog from 1935. Two of the paintings of the last group have since been restituted. Dense Forest in the Spring by Jakob Emil Schindler, which was part of the collection of the Belvedere in Vienna, and the repeatant Magdalene from the Stiftung Museum Kunstpalast in Düsseldorf. This painting was purchased by Rudolf Mosse as a Rubens painting, but today is declared to be a work of Rubens' studio, probably with a master involved. I could tell you a lot of interesting stories of the artworks, but I would like to leave it at this brief overview. All details of our provenance research results can be found in our MARI portal. Now I would like to address the questions of what we were able to find out beyond the mere reconstruction of the collection, such as Rudolf Mosse's motivation as an art collector, what significance the collection had during his time, how it was liquidated by the Nazis, and what we know today about the seizure strategies and distribution during the Nazi period. An important resource for our research are the collection catalogs. At the beginning of our project, there were 3 catalogs known to us from the years 1908, 1921, and 1929. The catalogs only contain works that were exhibited in the Mosse Palais at Leipziger Platz and not the entire collection. In addition to these catalogues, the Maritime was able to find 3 more from 1912, 1913 and 1915. The first catalogue from 1908 was published for the occasion of Mosse's 65th birthday. Thus, the cover appears in a decorative design. The other plain catalogues do not seem to have had any other reason than to list the artworks of the increasing collection from year to year. So there may also have been editions from 1909, 1910, and 1911. But the catalogues are only a little help when it comes to identifying the actual works involved. Only the last names of the artists are mentioned, occasionally with a first name or initial. The work titles frequently seem arbitrarily chosen. Information on technique is rarely provided, and dimensions and dates are lacking entirely. The publications, which are typically 16 to 42 pages long, also have no illustrations. Only the catalogue from 1929, which was edited by Hans Lachmann-Mosse, includes 25 selected masterpieces from the collection, which are illustrated with black and white photos. Despite the few object details, the catalogues have proven to be one of the most important resources for our research. With these catalogues, we are able to define the acquisition dates of the individual works much more precisely. A work which, for example, is listed in the 1913 catalogue but not yet in the 1912 catalogue must have been acquired in the short time in between. By the outbreak of the First World War, Rudolf Mosse had largely completed his collecting activities. It is remarkable that the artist names do not follow alphabetical order, but are listed according to the rooms in which the works were on display. What purpose was intended with this? From the beginning, Rudolf Mosse planned to make the exhibited part of his collection in his city palais available to the public. From 1909, it was possible to view the artworks after reservation or during charity events. Obviously, the catalogues, with its topographic structure, were used as orientation for the visitors. They include brief indications of where the rooms could be found, and at the first page is explained, quote, "The order of the works of art in the catalogue assumes that the viewing of them always begins to the left of the entrance door," end of quote. The catalogues thus not only depict the spatial distribution of the works, but even their precise location in the respective space. This allows us to compare the individual catalogues from the years 1908, 12, 13, and 15 to determine how the works were reassigned over the course of time, whether they were supplemented or replaced by specific new acquisitions. And because of that, they obtain authentic reference to Mosse's exhibition concept. In general, it can be concluded from the catalogues that Mosse primarily collected the art of his generation, that is, works of German realism from the second half of the 19th century, including popular genre scenes, landscapes from all over Germany, as well as portraits from public figures at that time. A special part of the collection included several contemporary sculptures, something that was quite rare for a private collection. With the presentation of selected artworks in his palais, in connection with a 2-meter-high frieze, the one Elisabeth already mentioned, with a 2-meter-high frieze on the facade of the building, Mosse's interest in art becomes particularly clear. The frieze was entitled "The Elevation of German Genius." Mosse commissioned the Berlin sculptor Max Klein to create the frieze in the spirit of the patriotic euphoria after the German-French wars and over the founding of the German nation-state in 87 and 87-1. The unification of the German territories met a demand that had become increasingly urgent ever since the March Revolution in 1948, in which his father Markus Mosse was involved. The frieze depicted the history of the development of the German nation, showing important figures from the Middle Ages to the late 19th century. In the final scene, the German eagle mauls the Gallic rooster, to symbolize the triumph over France, and the pride over the newly achieved national sovereignty. In this regard, it is interesting that although Mosse acquired some artworks by Italian, Norwegian, English, and Spanish painters of the 19th century as well, to place the core of his collection, German realism, into a pan-European frame of reference, which was at this time a very forward-looking socio-political view, he never purchased a single work by a French artist. Only later, most notably after his death, did his son-in-law Hans Lachmann-Mosse supplement works from very different epochs and non-European countries in order to expand the general art historical significance of the collection globally. As already mentioned, parallel to our research on individual works and the significance of Mosse's collection during Imperial Germany and the Weimar Republic, its liquidation under the Nazi regime and the fate of the Mosse family are subject of our project. Research into these matters is really challenging, since the Reichschamber of Fine Arts only started in 1935 to systematically control the auction houses and asks for complete documentation of the single sales. For the Mosse auction, these documents have not been compiled. Fortunately, we were able to close the large gap by own findings somewhat. For example, we now know numerous copies of the auction catalogs from 1934. Why are our new findings important, even if they are always involving the same issues from May and June 1935? The individual copies contain handwritten annotations on the limits, selling prices, and buyers of the works. Some of the information is abbreviated or even coded. The copy of the Union Catalog, at this slide, was, for example, in the estate of the granddaughter of the cabinet maker of Hans Lachmann-Mosse, the Lachmann-Mosse family, who get in touch with me after we published the Mari Portal in May last year. Here we find annotations to the household goods auctioned off from the Maßenstraße, cutlery, duvets, garden chairs, the furnishing of a girl's room, probably Hilde's, 11 pieces for the price of 70 Reichsmark, a shameful document of the Nazi raids and today irreplaceable for our research on loss and post-war owners. In addition to the catalogs, we were able to find other small yet central materials associated with the auctions. Some of these materials were disposable goods, which made them very rare. These included materials such as admissions and surcharge cards, transport lists, and so forth. With the help of these materials, the organization of the auction could be reconstructed. The most extensive insight we have made, and this brings me to the conclusion of my talk, came in connection with our research on the Aryanization of the Mosse Publishing Company. It was claimed for the first time in a 1959 publication that Hans Lachmann-Mosse had filed for bankruptcy on September 19, 1932. In the follow, all publications on Rudolf Mosse repeated the date, and in 1999, the author of a she was mentioned several times before. The author of a socio-historical study of the Mosse family concluded that the NS proceedings after 1933 to settle the Mosse concern could have only been a so-called cold Aryanization to satisfy the creditors. All earlier provenance reports from the last few years refer to this publication without being able to give evidence for this assertion. Contrary to these reports, the Mari team was able to clarify, after an examination of all relevant files, that settlement proceedings were only initiated on the 19th of September 1933, exactly 1 year later, and therefore was an intervention prompted by the Nazis. A simple writing error on the date have had serious consequences for the assessment of the fate of the Mosse family. Even though the restitution of artworks from the earlier Mosse collection were not in question before, our research shows how the Nazi propaganda explanations are still followed and relevant today, without even considering the facts. Only the results of both approaches, provenance and contextual research, and how they relate to one another, will contribute to the general investigation of Nazi crimes and its narratives in post-war Germany. Not least with these efforts, Mari, as a network of competence and efficiency, hopes to provide a fitting commemoration of Rudolf Mosse and his family as influential supporters of art. Thank you.